Hey, what's up you guys? It's Zach with PCBros, and today I'm going to show you how to build a budget gaming PC with no GPU that can still game really well. But first, I'm going to go over all these specs and show you how this works. The star of the show here is the Ryzen 5 8600G with integrated graphics, and we're setting up this whole PC with the Gigabyte B650M D3HP. This way we're getting into that AM5 platform. This has a large upgrade path opportunity. We're really setting this PC up to game out of the box, and this is DDR5 5600 MHz. Does have that nice RGB accent as well. Now we're going with the Gen 3 NVMe Team Group. This is only 512 gig NVMe, easily upgradable too. We do have another slot down the road. We can add 1 or even 2 terabytes. To power this build, we have the Sigotep GN 650 watt power supply. If you've watched a PCBros build video before, you could already guess that the PC case that we've picked out is none other than the Apivia Prodigy in black. So you might be thinking, how can this PC actually game at all? It doesn't have a GPU, that doesn't make sense. Just check out these benchmarks. I'm gonna have them up on screen and you can see for yourself that this is actually a pretty awesome out-of-box PC with no GPU. And of course, down the line, adding a GPU is just gonna make this even better. But for now, this budget option just makes sense in 2024. So here's some of the tools that you're going to need. You are going to need a Phillips screwdriver and a smaller one for the M.2 screws. Grab yourself a nice box cutter. Wire cutters to cut all the zip ties. We're pretty much just going to need this for the standoffs. And don't forget, zip ties are very important and you're gonna need a lot of them. Let's get right into this build. This is a super fun and easy build to start off with too. I'm gonna put the power supply and the case off to the side while leaving these 4 parts for step 1. So first up, let's open up that motherboard. We have a SATA cable right here. We do not need that. And we are just going to pull that motherboard out and make sure you get the IO shield as well. Now you can put that box to the side. Lay the motherboard flat just like that. We're gonna put the IO shield to the side too. We don't need that right now. And what we're going to do is install the CPU, the RAM, and the storage all on the motherboard. You can do this in whatever order. Let's just get that CPU done real quick. Carefully remove the CPU by holding it on both sides just like this. There will be a lever on the motherboard. We're gonna push it down. Push it down. That will open up the slot. And then we are going to line it up. This one has the arrows on the top right. And you see there is an arrow on the top right here. Usually it's on that casing. And then we will plot carefully into the slot. We will push that back down and then put the lever down, and then that should pop out. Now for this build, we are actually going to be using the stock CPU cooler, and this actually comes with thermal paste pre-applied. All we need to do is line it up and we're good to go. But before we put this on, these standoffs are in our way, so we're gonna take these off by removing the 4 screws here. So we will take these 2 top parts off. We still want to keep that back plate, so we have the screw holes for the CPU fan. So the way these holes are oriented, this will have to go either this way or this way. You can actually remove this casing and get that AMD logo facing up if you want, which I might do after the video, but for the sake of the video, I'm just gonna put it in like this. I know the AMD logo is not facing up. I like to take the cable and run it through in this little nice cable hidey spot. I like to keep one hand on the top to keep all these screws in line. And what we wanna do is tighten one screw and then go over to the corner and then tighten the other one a little bit. Then we will go to the next screw and then that next corner. This will make sure it stays on and even, and you want to screw these down until they stop. You will feel where it will hit the bottom. We are going to plug in the CPU fan. We're going to plug it into the CPU fan header, which is usually right on the top next to it. It will be labeled and it can only go one way. So we're just going to put it in and we are moving on to the next part. Next up, we got the RAM. Now, a few things to note is depending on what motherboard you have, on at least one side, like little levers that you push down. Some have it on both sides. You are going to want to make sure any levers you have for the slot that you're going to be using are open before putting the RAM in. And there's also a notch on the RAM slot that matches up with the RAM that you're using. So we're going to take our RAM, line the notches, and slide it in. And the RAM slots that we're going to be using are this second and this fourth one. Now that's not exactly how you would count it out, but just for the sake of the video and simplicity, just count to that second one and then the fourth one, and that's the one that we're gonna be using to build. So I'm gonna open up those two levers, line up the notch, and we are going to press down until you hear a click on both sides. Click and click. Now the RAM is in, the CPU is in, let's get that storage. Now we have two slots. If you have the storage that is supported by the motherboard to fit in this top one, usually this top one with the little shield on it is going to be a faster, better port. So we are going to be using that one. There's one screw keeping the shield on. We will unscrew it, pull that out, and slide the NVMe into that port. Push it in and then hold it down, and we're gonna add this back onto it. There's usually some protective film. Slide it back in, line up the screw, and we are good to go. The motherboard is done. I'm gonna do some cleaning up, and we're gonna move on to getting that case ready for the motherboard. I recommend not throwing away any boxes until you power on the PC and make sure it all works good and you've played on it a little bit, and then you can throw away the boxes. Because sometimes you'll find a problem later down the line, not have the box, and it'll be really hard to return it. So let's get this case box prepped and ready for the motherboard. Is take off the side panel by removing the 4 screws, and then take off the back panel as well. And we're gonna put this to the side and then remove the back panel. So you will find, usually in the back of your PC case, a little bag or box of hardware. We're going to be needing this. And our fan here has a little bit of a cable management issue. The cable is crossing right over where the IO shield is going to go and our motherboard is going to be going. So this is kind of blocking and in our way. So what we're gonna do is remove these 4 screws, and we are going to turn this fan 90 degrees where the cable is gonna be going up and over through that hole. It's a little nitpicky, but it also helps down the line, making sure everything is in place and cable management looks good. So remove the 4 screws with a Phillips screwdriver, and I would hold on to the back. And now we are going to rotate this just like that. So now the cable is going up, and now we are going to put the screws back in. All right, next up on the checklist before we put the motherboard into the case is count off the standoffs that are in the case, which are these little things that stick out and with the motherboard rest on. We're gonna make sure we have 1 for each of the hole on the motherboard. So we have 3 here, 3 in the middle, but then none on the right. So I already know we're going to need to add at least 2. Let me see, we have 3 here on the motherboard, 3 in the middle, and then we actually have 2 on the right. So in our hardware bag, you will find some standoffs, and we are going to take this and add them to the holes that match up with the motherboard. It really helps if you put it in here first and then screw it in. That way it doesn't fall out. And it looks like we're good here. So now we're going to lay the case flat, and we're going to take the IO shield, make sure we have it orientated the right way. So just look at the motherboard, see what the bottom hole should be. If there's any tabs like this one that need to be pulled back a little bit, that will help cables plugging in, because sometimes those get in the way. Line it up, and we will click, 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 and it should just pop right in, no screws needed. Now, the moment of truth. We're going to line up the motherboard and make sure it lines up with the IO shield, and then make sure each of the holes match up with the standoffs. And it usually helps to get the middle screw in first, so that helps line everything up. Now we're gonna make sure there's a screw for each hole, and once you do that, we'll move on to the next step. Once you are done, we are going to start plugging some stuff in. And what I'm doing here is I'm making sure none of the cables are tangled, and I can get to each one individually, because we'll be plugging in one at a time, making sure cable management is pretty clean each step of the way. This is where you're going to need the zip ties, because before we start plugging in, we're going to take a zip tie, go through the top hole here, keeping all of these cables together, but you can get to them individually, they are not tangled. And then we are going to do the same for this middle one right here. And the goal with doing this is not only does it keep all these cables together looking like one cable, it also keeps them out of these holes. So on the other side, you won't be able to see them. We are going to cut the excess as we go. And we can even put another one in the middle here if you would like. I just think it just looks a little bit better. And now we can start with whatever cable we want. I am going to start with the USB 3. That will be this one with the blue tip here. We are going to flip it over to the side and see where that USB 3 is. It is actually on the bottom right here. So we can go down on this hole and then plug it in. So we will go down on the bottom, move it around, and plug it in. The next step, we are going to do audio, which will pretty much always be on that bottom left. So we'll come back around, find where it says HD audio, and we are going to feed it through. There's a hole right on that bottom. Will get us perfectly to where we want to go. This has one hole that is blocked off to match up with the missing pin. So it can only go one way, and we're going to plug it in. And again, once we get everything in, we'll get to tighten up these cables and it will really hide most of it. We will next take one that says USB. There's a couple different options you can plug this into. It will be these plugs here with the white backing. So we can go through that middle one. And again, this has a hole that is blocked off to match the missing pin. So this can only go one way as well. And we are going to push it in. Whatever the closest one is to the hole is what I would do to make cable management look better. Now the last one that goes with the case is actually multiple different cables that go into one spot. We are going to take one that says LED switch, and we are going to put that off to the side. We will need that later. And we are going to take all the rest of them and feed them on through one of the bottom holes, because this front panel is actually right here. So we are going to feed it through here. And I'll give you a close-up here in a second to show you exactly which one's the front panel, because there's a lot of stuff going on there. So it should be labeled on your motherboard. I'll have a little graph here to help you out. And when we plug these in, we are going to do them one at a time. And the bottom ones, the words will be facing down. So we will take one that says HD LED, and then on the bottom left, we will plug it in, words facing down. And then we will take one that says reset or reset switch, do that one right next. These will be pretty tight and close together. And then we are going to do these two individual ones and go plus minus here on the top left. They'll just plug in right side by side. And then the last one here is the power switch that goes right next to that. And these are words facing up. Pull all the cables through, and now we have everything plugged in from the case to the motherboard. We're going to make this look a little better from the USB 3. All right. So next up, we're going to be plugging in the power supply. And this will actually be the last step because we don't have a GPU. So this is not a modular power supply, which means cable management's gonna be fun. With the fan facing down and the port facing out, we are going to take all these cables and just raise them up to make room to slide that power supply in. And your power supply should come with some zip ties and then some screws. We're going to use those to lock this power supply into place. And once you've screwed all 4 of those screws in for the power supply, we are now going to do some more plugging in. So we will not need all of these cables. We'll actually need very few. First one that you want to look for is this nice big one right here. This will always go in this top hole because that connector will be right here. Without sacrificing the cable management we've already done, make sure you don't tangle anything up and you just keep all the cables out of the way. And we're just going to take this one at a time, and it will all be fine. It'll be fine. So this has a little connector on it that matches up with the lip here on the port that will go facing that way. We are going to wiggle in and push and add pressure up and down because sometimes this one's not connected all the way. So just make sure you hear some sort of click and then feed that back through. So we got one done here. We are going to take that mess of cables and connect it to that middle one we already did. This way it just stays a little bit neater. Basically, we want to try to make everything look like it's just one cable the best we can, and then shove all that excess into the hidey hole basement. Next up, we are going to find one that says CPU. That will go on the top right hole here. So just making sure this one's not tangled with the rest. I am pulling that tight and then going here on the top right. And this one works just like the other one where it has a little lever that matches up with the lid. So it can only click in one way. You should hear a click. So now for this one, we are going to zip tie these two cables, feed that zip tie through that top hook. It's working our way down the line here. And there is actually only two more things we need to plug in. That LED switch I was talking about from earlier, that mixed in with the front panel, we are going to plug that in to this RGB header. This will control the RGB changing colors. Now this one has 2 pins that are on one side. So you want this to be off center to make sure it's plugged in all the way. And then we're going to take a zip tie and feed this through in the middle and wrap it around. This will keep it from coming undone. And now the last thing that we plug in is this SATA, which powers this. Now, fortunately for us, we have plenty of options for that. We don't need that. So find one of these SATA cables that have a ton of them on it and just take the one from the top to make it easier to cable manage, and we will connect those. And everything else we didn't use, I would just fold and put into the basement here. You can even zip tie it if you want. I personally don't like to do that in case you need something later. It makes it a little bit easier to get to. We are now going to stick the RGB header on the case. You can put it right here or on the power supply, wherever makes most sense to you. Remove the adhesive, stick, and then hold for a few seconds. And now we're gonna do some cleanup work, just making sure everything can shut here. We have a lot of cables, the downside of a non-modular power supply, especially in a smaller case like this. Take that panel, lock it in, and we are looking pretty good. Let's plug this in and see if it actually works. Moment of truth. There we go, there we go. RGB works, let's go, let's go. And you did it, you just built this awesome budget PC with no GPU. If you wanna know how to install Windows and get all the drivers set up for this so it's ready to game, check out this video right here. The link will be down below. But other than that, thank you so much for watching. Let me know if this was helpful. Let me know in the comments, what is the first game you would play on this PC?